that I just found today. That I was actually looking for something just like that, or I was gonna mention something just like that. The reason being is my channel is called Birthright Fantasy, and the majority of my collection is either Dungeons and Dragons, Star Wars, Warhammer, stuff like that. But recently, I've started into the Warhammer historical collection, in addition to other historical books as well. And how does that fit in the Birthright Fantasy? It's not fantasy, it's historical. Well, I was thinking about it myself. Like, where's the line between fantasy and fiction, right? It's a really blurry one. And the further you go back, the more blurry it gets. Well, obviously, I understand that this Waterloo book is a lot more historical than Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. Alright, but there's still, between all fact and fiction, there's still a hard time distinguishing between it, and it all depends on where you're born and where you're from and everything like that. So I guess with this book, I'll flip through every page here. That's what I'll do. I'll just do a quick overview of this book, and we'll take a look at what we have going on here. Once again, this is Waterloo Tabletop Gaming in the Age of Napoleon. Here it says, the Battle of Waterloo, 1815. French corsairs charging Scottish Highlanders in square. So by square they mean the square formation, which was the best way to defend against a cavalry attack. You can imagine what a chaotic and epic scene this would have been. Here's a quote I like. If they want peace, nations should avoid the pinpricks that precede cannon shots. Napoleon. Here we're in the rules section. So you can see back in these days the game systems were quite complex. You needed to have decently high IQ to play them. Now it's not quite the same. The games have been greatly simplified and marketed to be as easy as playable as possible. Which some people are going to get offended that I say that, but that's frankly the truth. And I'll make a whole video on it, and I'll prove to you. I'll bring up the original editions of Dungeons and Dragons and Warhammer, and we'll take a little bit of a read, and then I'll show you the newest editions of Warhammer and D&D. And you tell me that the older books are not written for a more intelligent audience. And now I'm not saying that only intelligent people should be playing war games or games in general. Not at all. I think it's a good thing that we've expanded. I'm just saying that there's certain changes that come along with changing the rules like that, and a little bit overwhelming for a more classic gamer like me. And here at Birthright Fantasy, I'm all about taking a little bit from here, a little bit from there regarding the rule systems, and not being all stuck on just one rule system. Here we have another quote from Napoleon. "Without cavalry, battles are without result." Napoleon. "At war, you must press upon an obstacle in order to overcome it." Napoleon. That's good advice, man. Some people don't even do that. To give you an idea how big this book is, we're on page 83 out of 288. And we just got out of the rule section. So page 1 through 80 or so, that's all rules right there. It's all rules. Then you get to scenarios. We have our first quote from Wellington, who was the British commander at Waterloo, who defeated Napoleon. "All the business of war is to endure, to find out what you don't know by what you do. That's what I call..." Hold on, this is a hard one to read. Let me read this in my head first before I read it out loud. The British complicate things sometimes. All the business of war is to endeavor to find out what you don't know by what you do. It's what I call, guess what was on the other side of the hill. Wellington. I guess it's not that complicated. It's just I'm not that good of a reader. Anyways, I'm still looking for that one quote. from Napoleon. So here we start in the scenarios. I'll talk a little bit about the book. Well, actually, these are still general. Later on, so these are general battles you do. But later on, it's going to give particular scenarios based on the battle at Waterloo. These are kind of generic battles you could play with the rule set. The fate of a nation may sometimes depend upon the position of a fortress. Napoleon. So here we have more rules. They're just put in a siege section, which I guess also has siege scenarios we see here. In an army, the infantry, cavalry, and artillery must be in right proportions. One weapon cannot compensate for another. Napoleon. So now we're to the army list. For example, of course, you have the French Empire. Talk about the officers you could have in your army list. Infantry battalions, cavalry squadrons, Imperial Guard, and your artillery. Then you have your French allies. The Italians, some Germans, Swiss mercenaries, Polish, Prussian. Interesting, because I know there's a company of Prussians that fought against Napoleon at Waterloo, but we'll see. We have Great Britain. Great Britain was the number one force opposing the French Empire in the age of Napoleon. I don't know what effect these men will have upon the enemy, but by God, they frightened me. Wellington, of his own troops. Honorable retreats are no ways inferior to brave charges, as having less fortune, more of discipline, and as much valor. Major General Sir William Napier. Yeah, so interesting. I'm looking for the Prussians. I could have sworn. Okay, Prussia has her older section. We'll take a look at that. Back to pretty much the British allies, Portuguese, Spanish. Pretty much the Portuguese and Spanish. Dutch. All right, here we go. Here's the explanation. I'll read a little bit of this here about Prussia. Those of you who don't know, the Prussian people were a Germanic nation in the north of Germany. They were very powerful at one point in history, and they were one of the two major powers that emerged. I think they were one of the two major powers that emerged when Germany started transforming from more of a medieval culture to a modern power. It says here, Prussia, perhaps more than any other nation of the Napoleonic Wars, went through unbelievable highs and lows as both enemies and allies of France. From the utter humiliation at the hands of Napoleon in 1806, the somewhat inconstant and indecisive King Frederick William III dragged the Prussian army from the ashes like a phoenix, and helped hand Napoleon ultimate defeat at Waterloo. So there you go. I was correct. If it's requested, I come back and read more, but I'll tell you, in the Battle of Waterloo, when it was looking bad for the French, there was another army that started marching into the field of battle. And the British were hoping it was the Prussians, and the French were hoping it was their army that was sent out to defeat the Prussians. So pretty much the question was, who won the battle? Was it the Prussians or was it the French? Because that determined who's coming to reinforce the battle. And from what I've read, Napoleon lied. He realized it was the Prussians, and their situation was already pretty bad, and now it was about to get a lot worse. But he lied to his troops in order to maintain or try to really stop the morale from dropping any lower. So he lied to his troops and told them, it's our reinforcements coming. Probably pretty pissed when they found out the truth. Probably pretty pissed. Here is an interesting quote I like. It's not the one I've been searching for. The history of a battle is not unlike the history of a ball. Some individuals may recollect all the little events of which the great result is the battle won or lost, but no individual can recollect the order in which, or the exact moment at which they occurred. By Wellington. So, of course, for nowadays, you could change ball with party, and there you go. Here we go. We're following it right up. What is history but a fable agreed upon? Napoleon. That is the exact quote that summarizes incorporating historic wargaming into birthright fantasy. Of course, like I said before, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this book is on the same level as the Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual, but at the same time, especially the further back you go, the more that history and fiction become more misty. And in the same light, a lot of fantasy is written based off history. So the two really do go hand in hand. So I found the quote, and we're on page 159, but I will continue on. So it looks like we still have some viewers here. So I'll continue on, finish off this book, and then call it for the night. People talk of their enlisting from their fine military feeling. All stuff. No such thing. Some of our men enlist from having got bastard children. Some for more minor offenses. Many more for drink. Wellington. And all this right here is talking about the history. Alright, so we're out of the rule section. We're out of the scenario section. We're just talking about the raw history. Great battles are won by artillery. Napoleon. Artillery is more essential to cavalry than to infantry, because cavalry has no fire for its defense, but depends on the saber. Napoleon. A revolution is an idea which has found its bayonets. Napoleon. I like that one. Yeah, we don't have a revolution going on right now, that's for sure. What was that again? That was great. A revolution is an idea which has found its bayonets. That's great. Oh man. Here we have a timeline of the Napoleonic Wars. A battle at the pyramids. That would be epic. You guys know that I think they exiled Napoleon 2 or 3 times. I think the third time he finally stayed away, but like the first 2 times they caught him. They didn't kill him. I guess they were just a time of gentlemanly acts. They didn't kill him, but they isolated him to some island off Italy or France or something. And he found his way back. One of the stories is they sent some French men to kill him, but when they came to him, he talked to them, and they ended up kneeling before him and declaring their allegiance to him as their emperor. And then from there, he went to do everything he did. One sharp blow, and the war is over. Napoleon at Austerlitz. So as you can see here, this timeline is very what's the word? Inclusive. Napoleon on August 8th, 1815. Napoleon is exiled to the remote South Atlantic island of St. Helena, where he dies in 1821. When you have resolved to fight a battle, collect your whole force, dispense with nothing. A single battalion sometimes decides the day. Napoleon. Geez, I really hope YouTube doesn't ban this stream talking about all these violent acts of history. Wouldn't want to be spreading the wrong kind of information around. So now we're in a section of the book that talks about collecting hobbies, painting, assembling. Part of the hobby I never really got into, but now I feel like I have the patience to try it out. But unfortunately right now I'm separated from a vast majority of my miniatures. I just have a couple miniatures here, like this orc. I didn't even paint this myself. It's actually from Gorka Morka. But that's a different topic. Let's stick to Napoleon. Let me turn off that light. I think it's too reflective. So now it's just showcasing some of their best work, their best painted models. It's awesome. I'll post a link to the guy, I forget his name, but someone on YouTube. I've seen him and he plays on battlefields just like this. At the outset of a campaign, you have to consider carefully whether you should move forward or not. But once the offensive has been launched, it must be followed through to its furthest limit. Napoleon. Now this is the part of the book, like I was saying, it talks about particular scenarios from Waterloo. And I think it even was talking about a way to play the Waterloo from the beginning to end, so you could play all these in order and see who would have won Waterloo. So this right here, the action at Gilly, is a historical fight that did happen between the forces. Same as this. And all these. And see, it's giving effects. It says, it is likely that the Allies will hold, I can't even begin to pronounce that, we'll call it Huguenot. However, should the French secure a major victory, then the French player may choose D3 of his surviving infantry units and one independent officer. Those units deploy with the French cavalry in scenario 8, assault on the French squares. So that's saying, like, if the French win this battle, then they have extra units to deploy with them in scenario 8. This right here this, once again, I don't know how to pronounce it. I call it Huguenot. I know that's not right, but that's another French word. Anyways, this was a small farming, not even a town, but just like a small farm that was in the middle of the battlefield. That was an important strategic objective, and both sides wanted it. The British held it, and the French came to assault, and it ended up being like a major, bloody, intense battle that they fought over this. Both sides ended up committing more troops than I thought. I guess I'll read that. I just read it in my head. I'll read it out loud. Assault on the British squares. In what is often regarded as a true military blunder, Marshal Ney, possibly mistaking the movement of Wellington's reserves as a retreat to exploit, gave the order for his cavalry squadrons to break through Wellington's center. Without the aid of D'Erloin's infantry corps, this attack was folly. Ney's cavalry attacked time after time, futilely trying to break regimented squares of infantry whilst being pounded by artillery. So that sounded like a bad move, and a waste of resources. Kind of goes into Napoleon's previous quote about you're going to need to have every regiment. So a mistake like that is a big deal. And it actually looks like I mistook that Huguenot thing I was saying. This is the farm. La Haye Sainte is the farm I was speaking about earlier. And I'll read this. The farm of La Haye Sainte, meaning sacred hedge, was a vital objective at the Battle of Waterloo. Both Wellington and Napoleon realized early on that control of the farm would secure their flank and suppress enemy movements, and it was fought over relentlessly for much of the day. The defense of the Holy Hedge by Adolphe Northern. says here, so much has been written about Napoleon Bonaparte that it has become difficult to separate the man from the myth. Once again, kind of goes into what I was talking about earlier. An accomplished soldier, strategist, philosopher, and administrator, he managed to lead France from the brink of chaos to become the head of a grand empire, whose armies are feared and respected the world over. For all of his reforms and military victories, he was painted as a monster, a self-serving tyrant, despot, and philanderer, and it took all the great powers of Europe to unite against him to finally curb his ambitions. Born in the same year as Napoleon, Wellington's life was diametrically one of duty to the crown. He made his name fighting in India, earning himself knighthood. After a brief foray into politics, he was recalled in 1808 and made head of the Anglo-Allied army in the Iberian Peninsula, which eventually forced the occupying French to withdraw from Spain and Portugal. When Napoleon abdicated in 1814, Wellesley returned home a hero and was created Duke of Wellington. When Napoleon returned from exile, like I talked about earlier, Wellington became commander of the Allied forces and, with the help of Blucher's Prussians, defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo in June 1815. And regarding the Prussians, one of the more colorful characters of the Napoleonic Wars, Blucher was a zealous, uncompromising, and unconventional soldier whose hatred of the French seemed to border on the pathological. Originally a cavalryman in the Swedish army, Blucher fought against the Prussians for a time before swearing his allegiance to Frederick the Great, twice returning to service after retiring. He earned great acclaim after overcoming a serious injury at Ligny to personally lead his men against Napoleon at Waterloo, securing victory for the Anglo-Allied army. At war, audacity is genius's most splendid calculation. Napoleon. And there you have it. That is the Warhammer historical Waterloo tabletop wargaming in the age of Napoleon. Thanks for tuning in.